So we're going into some of the darker books now.
Yep, from our beloved horror
Alright.
tinged comics.
I Vampire is the first one that we're going to be looking at in that kind of vein. And this is from Joshua Hale Falkov and Andrea Sorrentino.
That's right.
Okay. Joshua Hale Falkov wrote Elk's Run, which I really, really enjoyed. He also wrote two more recently, which I didn't even finish. I didn't really like it very much. So, just because I really enjoyed Elk's Run, I wanted to give this one a try. You probably would not have picked this one up otherwise. But
I do like the cover looks cool. They got that, like, the kind of hot, twink, shirtless vampire on it.
Oh my god.
Other than that, I don't know if I would.
Yeah, but since I really, really enjoyed Elk's Run, so I wanted to give this a try even though I didn't like Tumor. So, yeah, I Vampire. It's a pretty straightforward vampire book. There's this kind of tortured vampire who is kind of it kind of like goes between the past and the present with this vampire's relationship with another woman vampire. And the woman vampire is pretty much sees herself as a superior species. She wants to, kind of take over the world pretty much. And he's more like, oh, this is going to be the ruin of us. Why are you drinking human blood? He's like the vegetarian vampire.
So he's the good vampire, she's the bad vampire.
Exactly.
But they got a kind of romance.
Yep, and they have a romance between them. So this is pretty much him trying to convince her to kind of shy away from the dark side a little bit.
Right.
But the past is pretty much him and her kind of watching their relationship as they kind of drift apart a little bit. And the present is him pretty much destroying a bunch of people that she's bitten and infected recently. I did not like this book very much at all. It was pretty straightforward. For a book with a lot of vampires, it wasn't very scary. The art was like, trying to be like Jay Lee, but it wasn't good enough. And I think the transition, especially between the present and past, was really muddy and jarring.
Okay.
So as much as I like a horror book, and as much as I like past things from Falkov, this just didn't really do it for me.
Yeah, I agree totally. I didn't really like this one very much either. The story was, nothing forgettable, nothing we really haven't seen before. If you've read any vampire fiction or comics or movies, which are in abundance these days.
Yeah.
You're totally. I think your assessment of Sorrentino's artwork is dead on. Obviously, very reminiscent of Jim Lee. It's a very dark, murky looking book. Lots of shadows, lots of silhouettes, to the point of really kind of even obscuring the appearances of the characters. It just wasn't a very nice looking book. And yeah, the story was just so kind of blah. I just felt like there was no idea here.
Yeah.
I just felt it was kind of like, well, we should probably have a vampire book. So, you know what I mean? It just didn't. There wasn't much of a hook to it. It just was kind of like, okay, good male vampire has a kind of semi-relationship with evil female vampire, and he's gonna fight her. There it is. Like, it just didn't seem like enough. I mean, maybe that's somewhat hypocritical in that The Flash was so straightforward, but I think The Flash had a really nicely constructed story and nicely constructed scenes that were pleasing to look at because of the artwork, whereas I Vampire was just a very drab, just kind of blah book. There was nothing really sexy or interesting about it. Especially given how prevalent vampire fiction is these days. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're just kind of trying to cash in on like Twilight, kind of stuff, but it was just a really kind of dull book. I don't really know why they did this book.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Not much to say about that one.
No, it was kind of a downer, not really that interesting. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next up we've got a pretty. This is an interesting book. We'll see how much we like it. But this is Justice League Dark. So this is one of like 3 or 4 Justice League books that DC has put out during this New 52 deal. This one, which is written by Peter Milligan, who also did Red Lanterns, and Michael Janin is the artist. This is basically, like, they could call this book Vertigo Team Up, right? So this is like a lot of the supernatural themed characters. So we've got, we'll just go through Shade the Changing Man, Dead Man, Madame Xanadu, John Constantine, Zatanna, Enchantress is at this point sort of like the villain. So it's this group of kind of mystical, magical, kind of horror-themed characters, many of whom have been published through DC's Vertigo imprint in the past, kind of teamed up on a team. So it's another kind of unconventional team book. So in this first issue, something's going on with the Enchantress. And it's causing a lot of these bizarre magical occurrences throughout the DC universe. Initially, the Justice League, the actual Justice League, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Cyborg, go off to try and stop this. They try to confront Madame Xanadu and are roundly defeated, very quickly defeated by the magic. So the Justice League is kind of in over their heads. And interesting that we see the Justice League assembled here for the first time when they have not yet even come together in their own book. Another kind of odd editorial decision. But so the Justice, this is a threat that the regular Justice League can't handle. So these semi-mystical, magical characters are going to have to come together, and they begin to come together in this book to deal with this threat. This book kind of slowly won me over. I ultimately think I do recommend it. At first, I was a little put off because I felt as though it really depended on certainly a familiarity and also probably an affection on the part of the reader for these Vertigo characters, which I didn't really come to the book with so much. I feel like the book kind of assumed a kind of familiarity, affection for these characters. But I was sort of won over by just kind of the oddness of the book. They're a really strange group of characters. The various kind of magical threats that are going on and different things that are happening in this book are kind of weird, quirky events. And Peter Milligan's done a lot of that kind of work. He wrote Shade the Changing Man for some time. So I ultimately, I kind of was won over by just the oddness of it, and I think ultimately, it could definitely be a cool series to follow. A really weird mix of characters, and it could be a lot of fun. So ultimately, I didn't completely love it. I thought the artwork was a little stiff, kind of an odd style for this sort of story. But ultimately, I liked it. I thought it was interesting. What would you think?
I have the same kind of reaction, actually.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly a home run, but it was good enough. You know what I mean?
As I read more and more, I was liking it more and more as it went on.
Well, it just makes me kind of like wonder what's going. It intrigues me, I guess. Yeah. And I really do like that premise of the magical characters kind of coming together. The premise is kind of what sells it for me a little bit, because I don't have any affection for any of these characters either. I've encountered them in various comics throughout the years, like just briefly, so I don't have a big affection for any of them. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like it could be really cool. But yeah, the weirdness stuff is pretty weird. I kind of don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, it was a little even hard to quite pin down what was happening in the plot.
But I do like a little bit. But I like things he's doing with the characters, like Shade the Changing Man. Like what he was doing, I think was a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
I'm kind of just intrigued to see where that kind of a thing goes. But yeah, the whole thing with the Enchantress, I'm just not really sure of what's going on. But I'm sure it will be explained.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in trying to summarize the plot here, I don't really know if I can explain what
there's all kinds of weird things going on.
But it's kind of, I feel like that's kind of okay in a book like this at this point. I do get the sense that Peter Milligan is very in control of the story, and if things are obscure at this point, that's probably deliberate. So yeah, I have a pretty good feeling about this first issue, and I have a good feeling about this book going forward. So I, kind of a tentative recommendation for this one. I also think that this one is kind of can serve as an interesting kind of commentary on where the DC universe is at, kind of like the state of the DC universe. As we've been observing in a lot of these DC 52 comics, and we discussed this an episode or two ago, it seems as though DC has become more comfortable injecting elements of horror into even their mainline superhero books. So if you look at these kind of characters, I mean, a lot of these characters, like Shay the Changing Man and Deadman, started off as, more kind of regular superhero characters that existed within the DC universe. But they eventually kind of moved off into the darker kind of Vertigo corner of the DC universe, where they were allowed to become stranger, a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more adult. Now that the entire DC universe is kind of going that way, these characters are kind of coming back into it, and there's more of a place for them there. So I kind of was aware of that as I was reading it too. So that's kind of, it's interesting to look at how this book fits into the DC universe as it exists today, as opposed to, how you would have done a book like this a few years ago. It might have been a Vertigo book, or it might not even really have been possible to do this book. Vertigo and regular DC seem a little bit more firmly separated, whereas now there seems to be more blending, which I'm all for. I think it creates a more interesting DC universe.
Mm-hmm.